They told her she didn't belong in first class. They dragged her down the aisle while the entire plane laughed. They thought she was just a seat filler who got lucky with an upgrade. But what flight attendant Brett and the entitled heiress in seat 1B didn't know was that the woman they were assaulting wasn't just a passenger. She was Nia Sterling, the billionaire CEO who had secretly bought the entire airline exactly 45 minutes ago. And by the time this plane lands, their careers, their reputations, and their bank accounts are going to be reduced to ash. Grab your popcorn, because the karma in this story hits harder than a 747. The recycled air inside the cabin of Aerolux Flight 409 smelled of expensive leather and faint citrus sanitizer. It was the smell of exclusivity. Nia Sterling adjusted the noise-cancelling headphones over her ears, pulling the hood of her oversized charcoal-grey cashmere sweater further down her forehead. To the untrained eye, she looked like a college student who had rolled out of bed late for a flight. To a trained eye, the sweater was a vintage piece from the Brunello Cucinelli fall collection, costing more than most people's Honda Civics, and the beat-up sneakers on her feet were limited edition prototypes from a private auction in Tokyo. But nobody on Flight 409 had a trained eye. They only had judgment. Nia was exhausted. She had spent the last 72 hours in a windowless boardroom at the Kensington private equity headquarters in Manhattan, engaging in a hostile takeover that would reshape the aviation industry. She hadn't slept. She hadn't eaten anything other than stale croissants and black coffee. Now, all she wanted to do was sleep for the 7-hour flight from JFK to London Heathrow. She curled into seat 1A, the prime spot in the first-class cabin. She buckled her belt, closed her eyes, and let out a long breath. "Excuse me?" The voice was shrill, like a fork scratching against a porcelain plate. Nia didn't open her eyes immediately. She hoped, perhaps foolishly, that the voice was talking to someone else. "Hello? Are you deaf?" I said. "Excuse me." A sharp tapping on her shoulder forced Nia to look up. Standing in the aisle was a woman who looked like she had been manufactured in a factory that specialized in arrogance. She wore a tweed Chanel suit that was a little too tight, massive sunglasses despite being indoors, and she was clutching a Louis Vuitton pet carrier as if it were a nuclear football. This was Tiffany St. Cloud. Nia slid her headphones down to her neck. "Can I help you?" Tiffany looked Nia up and down, her lip curling in undisguised disgust. She scanned the hoodie, the lack of visible jewelry, and Nia's messy bun. "You're in my seat," Tiffany declared, waving a manicured hand dismissively. "The help usually sits in the back. I think you made a wrong turn at the boarding gate, sweetie." Nia blinked, her patience already thinning. "I'm in seat 1A. My boarding pass says 1A. "That's impossible," Tiffany scoffed, dropping her heavy carry-on bag onto the floor with a loud thud that shook the floorboard. "I am Tiffany St. Cloud. My father is Harrison St. Cloud, the senator. I always sit in 1A. It's the bulkhead. I need the legroom for Muffin." She gestured to the carrier, where a small, trembling Pomeranian let out a yap. "Well, Tiffany," Nia said, her voice calm but steel-edged. "Unless Muffin can fly the plane, he's going to have to settle for 1B. I booked this ticket 3 days ago. I paid full price. I'm not moving." Nia went to put her headphones back on, signaling the end of the conversation. That was the wrong move. Tiffany gasped, a theatrical sound that drew the attention of the other 6 passengers in the first-class cabin. A businessman in 2A lowered his Wall Street Journal. An older woman in 3B peered over her reading glasses. "Did you just dismiss me?" Tiffany screeched. "Do you have any idea who I am? I don't sit in the second seat. I require the window on the left side. It's for my anxiety. And I certainly don't sit next to urban litter." Naya froze. The air in the cabin seemed to drop 10 degrees. The urban litter comment hung in the air. Toxic and undeniable. Naya slowly stood up. She was tall, 5'10", and even in sneakers she towered over Tiffany. "What did you just call me?" Tiffany took a half step back, but doubled down on her entitlement. "I said what I said. You obviously scammed this ticket, or maybe you used some diversity miles program. But you don't belong here. This is first class. It's for people who contribute to society." Before Naya could respond, and she had a response ready that would have likely made Tiffany cry, a male flight attendant rushed over. His name tag read Brett. He was tall, blonde, with a smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating blue eyes. He had been watching the interaction from the galley, and he had already made his decision on who to support. "Is there a problem here, Ms. St. Cloud?" Brett asked, turning his back entirely to Naya to address Tiffany. "Yes, Brett, thank God you're here," Tiffany whined, pointing a finger at Naya. "This person is in my seat, and she's being aggressive. I feel threatened. Muffin feels threatened. She refused to move when I asked her politely." Brett turned to Naya. His face lost all traces of customer service warmth. It was the face of a bouncer looking to eject a drunk. "Ma'am," Brett said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass." "I already scanned it at the gate," Naya said, crossing her arms. "And I'm not ma'am. My name is Ms. Sterling." "Boarding pass, now," Brett snapped, holding out his hand. Naya reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She pulled up the QR code and held it out. Brett snatched the phone from her hand, a violation of protocol, and squinted at the screen. "Seat 1A, Brett read aloud. He frowned. He swiped the screen, checking the booking details. "Full fare, one way." "See?" Naya said, reaching for her phone. "Now give it back." Brett didn't give it back. He looked from the phone to Naya, then to Tiffany, who was tapping her foot impatiently. He made a calculation. On one side, a black woman in a hoodie who looked like she might be a rapper's girlfriend or a lottery winner. On the other side, Tiffany St. Cloud, a Platinum Medallion member whose father was a known politician. At Aerolux, the unwritten rule was, keep the Platinum members happy. "This looks like a system error," Brett lied smoothly. He looked Naya in the eye. "We've been having glitches with the third-party booking apps. This seat was reserved for Ms. St. Cloud weeks ago. The system obviously double-booked it, and since she has seniority status with the airline, the seat is hers." "That's a lie," Naya said, her voice dropping an octave. "I bought this directly through the Aerolux Black-Tier concierge line. It's not a glitch." "I don't have time to argue with you about software," Brett said, shoving the phone back into Nia's chest, forcing her to grab it before it fell. "You need to grab your things. I can find you a seat in economy comfort. Row 12 is open." "I'm not sitting in row 12, Nia said. "I paid $12,000 for this seat. If you move me, you are in breach of contract." Tiffany let out a cruel laugh. $12,000? Please, you probably used a stolen credit card. Brett, get her out of here. She smells like marijuana. Nia hadn't touched a drug in her life. She smelled like Le Labo Santal 33, a perfume that cost $300 a bottle. "That's it," Brett said, puffing up his chest. "Ma'am, you are disturbing the other passengers. You are being disruptive and combative. I am giving you a direct order from a flight crew member. Vacate seat 1A immediately, or I will have you removed." Nia looked at Brett. She looked at the cockpit door, which was currently open as the pilots went through pre-flight checks. She looked at the onlookers who were now filming with their phones. "Brett," Nia said softly, "I want you to think very carefully about your next move. because if you touch me, or if you move me from this seat, you will regret it for the rest of your life." "Do you know who I am?" Brett laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "I know exactly who you are. You're a problem, and I'm the solution." Brett reached for the radio clipped to his shoulder. "Captain, this is the cabin. We have a level 2 security issue in first class. Passenger refusing to deplane. Requesting authorities to the gate." Nia sat back down. She buckled her belt. She pulled out her phone and sent a single text message to a contact named Victor Legal. The text read, "Execute Order 66, Aerolux, now." Then she looked up at Brett and smiled. "Call the police, Brett. Call the FBI for all I care. I'm not leaving." The atmosphere in the first-class cabin shifted from awkward to hostile in seconds. The air was thick with tension. Tiffany St. Cloud was now standing in the aisle, performing a full victim routine for the other passengers. "It's just unbelievable," she was saying to the businessman in 2A. "I just want to get to London for Fashion Week, and we have to deal with this ruffian holding up the flight. It's so selfish." The businessman nodded sympathetically. "They really should screen people better," he mumbled, glancing fearfully at Nia. Brett was pacing by the galley, whispering furiously into the interphone to the cockpit. A moment later, the captain emerged. Captain Rogers was a man in his 50s with silver hair and a demeanor that suggested he just wanted to retire. He looked at Brett, then at Nia. "What's the issue here?" Rogers asked, his voice weary. "She's refusing to move, Captain," Brett said, pointing an accusatory finger at Nia. "She stole Ms. St. Cloud's seat assignment. She's been verbally abusive. She threatened me, and Miss St. Cloud smells contraband on her." Captain Rogers sighed and looked at Nia. "Miss, is this true?" "No," Nia said calmly. "It is entirely false. I have a valid ticket. This flight attendant is trying to downgrade me illegally to accommodate his friend. And as for the smell, it's Le Labo. If he had any taste, he'd know that." "I don't care about your perfume," Rogers snapped. He checked his watch. "We miss our slot in 10 minutes. I don't have time for a sit-in protest. Miss, you have 2 choices. You take the seat in economy, or you get off my plane." "I choose option 3, Nia said. "I stay in my seat, you fly the plane, and you file a formal apology to my office by the time we land." Roger's face turned red. "You are trespassing on a federal aircraft. Brett, get the gate agents. Get Port Authority." As Brett rushed up the jet bridge, Tiffany leaned over, her face inches from Nia's. "You're going to jail, honey," she whispered, her breath smelling of peppermint and malice. "And when you get out, good luck getting a job at McDonald's with a record. You picked the wrong white girl to mess with." Nia didn't flinch. She just stared at Tiffany with eyes that looked like dark pools of oil. "And you picked the wrong black girl to underestimate. Enjoy your seat, Tiffany. It's going to cost you everything you own." 2 minutes later, the heavy thud of boots echoed on the jet bridge. 3 Port Authority officers boarded the plane. They were big, serious men with tasers on their belts. They saw Brett waving them down. "That's her," Brett said, pointing at Nia like she was a fugitive. "She's belligerent. She made a threat against the flight safety." The lead officer, Officer Miller, approached Nia. "Ma'am, you need to grab your bags and come with us." "Am I under arrest?" Nia asked, still seated. "You're being detained for trespassing and interfering with a flight crew," Miller said. "Stand up, now, or we will assist you." Nia looked at her phone. No reply from Victor yet. The transaction must still be processing. The database update for the FAA registry took time. She needed 5 more minutes. "I'm not resisting," Nia said, raising her hands. "But I cannot walk. I'm feeling faint. The stress." "Oh, give me a break," Tiffany yelled. "She's faking it. Drag her out." "Ma'am, stand up!" Miller barked. He grabbed Nia's arm. "Ow, you're hurting me!" Nia cried out, louder than necessary. She wanted the cameras to catch this. She wanted every pixel recorded. "Let's go!" Miller yanked her up. Nia stumbled, her sneaker catching on the carpet. "Get her bag!" another officer shouted. Brett grabbed Nia's limited edition Hermes Birkin bag from the overhead bin, a bag worth $40,000, and tossed it onto the floor of the jet bridge like it was a sack of potatoes. "Hey!" Nia shouted. "That's property damage! Move!" Miller shoved her forward. Nia was marched down the aisle. The humiliation was total. Every face in first class was looking at her with a mix of pity and scorn. Tiffany was clapping. Actually clapping. "Bye-bye, Felicia." Tiffany jeered as Nia passed her. "Don't drop the soap." Nia was shoved out of the plane and onto the jet bridge. The cool air of the terminal hit her. People in the gate area stared as she was manhandled toward the desk. "Put her in the holding room until we can process the charges," Brett told the officers, standing at the door of the plane, looking triumphant. "I have to get this flight in the air. We're already late. I'll file the full report when we land in London." "Roger that," Miller said. He slapped handcuffs on Nia's wrists. The cold metal bit into her skin. Nia didn't struggle. She stood tall, even in cuffs. She looked back at Brett. "Brett," she said, her voice cutting through the noise of the terminal. "What's your last name?" "It's Hansen," Brett sneered. "Not that it matters. You're banned from Aerolux for life." "Hansen," Nia repeated, memorizing it. "Okay, Brett Hansen. Have a safe flight. I'll see you in London." "You're not going to London, sweetheart," Brett laughed. "You're going to a cell." Brett turned around, walked back onto the plane, and the heavy door slammed shut. The lock engaged. Nia stood there, handcuffed, surrounded by police. The gate agent, a kind-looking woman named Sarah, looked at Nia with sympathy. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. He's difficult." "It's okay, Sarah," Nia said softly. Suddenly, Nia's phone, which was still in her hand, Miller hadn't taken it yet, buzzed. A notification popped up on the screen. Message from Victor. "Legal subject. Acquisition complete. Details. The wire transfer has cleared. The paperwork is filed with the SEC. You are now the majority shareholder of Aerolux Aviation Group. You own 51% of the voting stock, effective immediately." Nia looked at the phone. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "Officer Miller," Nia said. "Quiet," Miller grunted. "We're waiting for transport." "Officer Miller, I'd like to make a phone call," Nia said. "It's relevant to the charges. You can call your lawyer from the station." "I don't need a lawyer," Nia said, holding up the phone screen so he could see the official bank document displaying a transfer of $4.2 billion. "I need you to unhand me, because you are currently detaining the owner of the airline you are standing in." Miller looked at the screen. He saw the seal of the Bank of America, Mergers and Acquisitions Department. He saw Nia's name. He saw the title, Owner and Chairwoman. Miller blinked. He looked at the plane, which was beginning its pushback from the gate. He looked back at Nia. You own the airline." "As of 2 minutes ago," Nia said. "Now take these cuffs off me. I have a plane to catch." "But the plane is leaving," Sarah, the gate agent, said, looking at the screen in shock. "No," Nia said, rubbing her wrists as Miller hastily unlocked the cuffs, his face pale. "It's not leaving." Nia tapped a number on her phone. She put it on speaker. "Operations Control, this is Director Vance," a voice on the other end answered. "Vance, this is Nia Sterling," she said. "Authentication code, Alpha Zero Niner King." There was a pause, the rustling of papers. Then, a terrified voice. "Ms. Sterling, we just got the memo. Congratulations on the acquisition. How can we serve you?" "Abort the takeoff of Flight 409 to London," Naya commanded. "Tell the tower to ground the plane immediately. Have them return to the gate." "Ground the plane? But the fuel costs, the schedule." "Did I stutter, Vance?" Naya asked. "Bring my plane back. I have some trash to take out." Inside the cabin of Flight 409, the mood in first class was celebratory, at least for one person. As the massive Boeing 787 taxied toward the runway, the engines whining with building power, Tiffany St. Cloud was practically glowing with triumph. She had reclined her seat 1A, to a comfortable 45-degree angle. She had kicked off her heels and was currently sipping a glass of Dom Perignon 2008 that Brett had poured for her before they even hit the main taxiway. "Honestly, Brett," Tiffany said, her voice loud enough for the entire cabin to hear, "you handled that beautifully. It's so rare to find service workers who understand the importance of pedigree. I'm going to make sure my father mentions your name to the CEO of Aerolux." Brett, who was securing the galley for takeoff, beamed. "It was my pleasure, Ms. St. Cloud. We pride ourselves on maintaining a certain standard in this cabin. We can't have people like that ruining the experience for our premium guests." The businessman in 2A, who had watched the whole thing, looked uncomfortable but said nothing. He just stared out the window. "She was probably high," Tiffany continued, laughing as she fed a piece of dried salmon to Muffin, her Pomeranian. "Did you see those sneakers? They looked like they came out of a dumpster. And claiming she owned the seat. Delusional. I bet she's never even seen the inside of a private lounge." "Well, she's the police's problem now," Brett said, checking the latch on a cabinet. "She'll be lucky if she doesn't spend the night in the county lockup." The plane turned onto the active runway. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff." The engines roared. The plane began to accelerate. Tiffany closed her eyes, ready for the thrust of takeoff to push her back into the stolen seat. Then, abruptly, the engines cut. The plane didn't just slow down. The brakes engaged with a jarring shudder that sent Tiffany's champagne flute sliding off the console and onto her lap. The cold liquid soaked into her tweed Chanel skirt. "What on earth?" Tiffany shrieked, jumping up and brushing at the wet spot. "My skirt! This is vintage!" The plane came to a complete stop in the middle of the tarmac. A collective murmur of confusion rippled through the cabin. In economy, babies started crying. In first class, the wealthy passengers looked at each other with irritation. Brett unbuckled his jump seat harness and grabbed the interphone. "Captain, what's going on? We had clearance." Captain Rogers's voice came over the cabin speakers a moment later, and he sounded confused. In fact, he sounded rattled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I apologize for the abrupt stop. We have just received an emergency directive from corporate headquarters. We have been ordered to return to the gate immediately." "Return to the gate?" Tiffany yelled, standing up despite the fasten seatbelt sign. "I have a dinner reservation at the Shard. We can't go back." Brett held up a hand to silence her, listening to the pilot on the private line. "Captain, is it a mechanical issue?" "No, Brett," Rogers replied, his voice tense. "It's an executive order, code red. They said if we take off, the FAA will pull our operating license before we hit cruising altitude. I don't know who made the call, but operations is terrified. We're turning around." Brett hung up the phone, his face pale. Code red was reserved for bomb threats or hijackings, but the captain had said corporate headquarters. "Is it a terrorist?" Tiffany asked, clutching her dog. "Was it that girl? Did she plant a bomb?" "It has to be," Brett whispered, his mind racing. "She said something about taking out the trash before she left. She must have called in a threat." Brett's eyes narrowed. "Don't worry, Ms. St. Cloud. If she called in a fake bomb threat, she's not going to county jail. She's going to federal prison for 20 years. We're going back to the gate, and I'm going to personally make sure the FBI is waiting for her." The massive plane completed a slow, agonizing 180-degree turn. It taxied back past the long line of other planes waiting to take off, a giant metal walk of shame. It took 20 minutes to get back to gate B-42. The passengers were restless. The air conditioning had been turned down to save power, and the cabin was getting stuffy. Finally, the bell chimed. The seatbelt sign turned off. "Stay here," Brett told Tiffany. "I'm going to open the door. Expect to see a SWAT team." Brett marched to the main cabin door, 1L. He peered through the porthole. He didn't see a SWAT team. He saw the jet bridge connected. He saw the station manager, Mr. Halloway, a man who usually never left his glass-walled office, standing right at the threshold, looking terrified. Brett disarmed the door, grabbed the handle and rotated it. He pushed the heavy door open, ready to give a statement to the authorities. "Officer, the woman responsible is—" Brett stopped. The words died in his throat. There were no SWAT team members. There were no FBI agents in windbreakers. Standing in the center of the jet bridge, flanked by Mr. Halloway and two men in sharp Italian suits who carried leather briefcases, was Nia Sterling. She was no longer wearing the hood over her head. Her hair was pulled back, revealing a face of striking, terrifying beauty. She stood with her posture perfect, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. She looked calm. She looked regal. And she was definitely not in handcuffs. "Hello, Brett," Nia said. Her voice was smooth, like velvet wrapped around a razor blade. "Did you miss me?" Brett blinked, his brain unable to process the image in front of him. How did you get out? You're supposed to be in a holding cell." "I don't do cells, Brett," Nia said, stepping across the threshold onto the plane. "I do boardrooms." Brett instinctively stepped in front of her to block her path. "You are not allowed on this aircraft. You've been blacklisted. Mr. Halloway, why is this passenger loose? Call security." Mr. Halloway, the station manager for JFK, stepped forward. He was sweating profusely. He reached out and physically grabbed Brett by the shoulder, pulling him out of Nia's way. "Shut up, Brett," Halloway hissed, his voice trembling. "For the love of God, shut your mouth." "Excuse me." Brett looked at his boss in shock. "She's a security threat." "She's the owner, you idiot," Halloway whispered harshly. Brett froze. What?" Nia didn't wait for the explanation to sink in. She walked past Brett as if he were a piece of furniture. She stepped into the first-class cabin. The silence that fell over the cabin was absolute. Every passenger turned to look. Tiffany St. Cloud, who was busy trying to scrub champagne out of her skirt with a napkin, looked up and dropped her jaw. "You!" Tiffany shrieked. "How did you get back here? Did you break out?" Nia stood at the front of the cabin, right where the flight attendants usually gave the safety demonstration. She turned to face the passengers. She didn't look like a seat filler anymore. She looked like she owned the air they were breathing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Nia said, her voice projecting clearly without shouting. "My name is Nia Sterling. I apologize for the delay in your travel plans today. The plane had to return to the gate because there was a serious personnel issue that required immediate executive action." "Executive action?" the businessman in 2A asked, lowering his newspaper. "Who are you?" "I'm the chairwoman of Sterling Capital," Nia said. "And as of 45 minutes ago, I am the sole owner of Aerolux Aviation." A gasp rippled through the cabin. Tiffany let out a scoffing laugh. "You're a liar!" Tiffany yelled. "You're a homeless scammer. Brett, get her off." Nia turned her head slowly to look at Brett, who was standing by the door, shaking. Brett, Naya said. Come here, please. Brett walked forward, his legs feeling like jelly. He looked at Holloway for support, but Holloway was staring at the floor. Yes, Mom, Brett stammered. Brett, take out your tablet, Naya commanded. The one you use for passenger manifests. Brett fumbled with his apron pocket and pulled out the company-issued iPad. Open the company directory, Nia said. Refresh the page. Brett's fingers shook as he tapped the screen. The app loaded. The organizational chart appeared. At the very top, where the CEO's picture used to be, there was a new entry. It had been updated remotely by the IT department minutes ago. Chairwoman and CEO, Nia Sterling. Brett stared at the picture. It was Nia. A professional headshot, looking powerful and intimidating. Read it out loud, Brett, Nia said softly. Chairwoman, Nia Sterling, Brett whispered. Louder, Nia said. Chairwoman Nia Sterling, Brett said, his voice cracking. Nia nodded. She turned back to the passengers. Now that we've established my credentials, we have some housekeeping to do. She turned fully to Brett. Brett Hansen, you have been employed by Aerolux for 6 years. In that time, you have 3 complaints on your file for rudeness, but they were ignored by management because you hit your sales targets for duty-free items. Brett's eyes went wide. How do you know that? I own the data, Brett. I know everything, Nia said. She took a step closer to him. Today, you violated 3 federal aviation regulations. You profiled a passenger based on appearance. You accessed private passenger data without cause. And you physically assaulted a client, me, by seizing my property without consent. I was just following protocol regarding disruptive passengers. Brett tried to argue, sweat dripping down his forehead. No, Nia cut him off. You were following your own prejudice. You looked at me, saw a black woman in a hoodie, and decided I didn't belong in your world. You decided I was trash to be taken out. Nia reached out and plucked the silver purser wings from Brett's lapel. You're fired, Brett, Nia said. Effective immediately. But I'm not just firing you. I'm instructing our legal team to file a civil suit against you for damages to my reputation. And I'm putting a note on your permanent industry record. You will never work for an airline again. Not Delta, not United, not even a cargo plane hauling rubber dog vomit out of Hong Kong. Brett looked like he was going to vomit. Please, Ms. Sterling, I have a mortgage. I didn't know. You didn't know I was a billionaire, Nia corrected him. But if I had been a janitor who saved up for 10 years to buy this ticket, you would have treated me the exact same way. That is why you're fired. Not because of who I am, but because of who you are. Nia pointed to the door. Get off my plane. Now. Brett looked around the cabin, pleading with his eyes for someone to save him. But the passengers were silent. Even the businessman in 2A was nodding in agreement. Brett hung his head. He grabbed his bag from the galley and walked off the plane, passing Mr. Holloway, who wouldn't even look him in the eye. Nia took a deep breath. She smoothed her sweater. Then she turned her eyes to Seat 1A. Tiffany St. Cloud was sitting very still. Her face was pale beneath her heavy makeup. She was clutching Muffin so hard the dog let out a small squeak. Nia walked over to Seat 1A. She stood over Tiffany, casting a long shadow. Now, Nia said, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. Let's talk about my seat. Tiffany swallowed hard. She tried to summon her usual arrogance, but it flickered and died in the face of Nia's presence. Look, Tiffany said, her voice trembling. I didn't know. Okay? I'm sorry. My father is Senator St. Cloud. If you want money, he can write a check. Just let me stay in the seat. I really need the legroom. Nia laughed. It was a genuine, amused laugh. Money? Nia asked. Tiffany, I just bought an airline on a Tuesday afternoon because I was annoyed. Do you think I need your father's money? Nia leaned down, placing her hands on the armrests of seat 1A, boxing Tiffany in. You called me urban litter, Nia said. You insulted my intelligence, my hygiene, and my right to exist in this space. You thought your last name made you untouchable. My father is a senator, Tiffany squeaked. He heads the transportation committee. Not anymore, Nia said calmly. Tiffany blinked. What? While we were taxiing back to the gate, Nia explained, checking her nails, I made a call to my legal team in D.C. It seems your father has been using campaign funds to pay for your lavish trips to Europe. That's a felony, Tiffany. The story just broke on CNN 5 minutes ago. Your father is currently holding a press conference to announce his resignation. Tiffany grabbed her phone. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped it twice. She pulled up the news. There it was. Breaking news. Senator St. Cloud implicated in embezzlement scandal. No, Tiffany whispered. Daddy. So you see, Nia said, standing up straight. Oh, you don't have a senator father to protect you anymore, and you definitely don't have the money to pay for a first-class ticket. Nia snapped her fingers. 2 large security guards entered the plane from the jet bridge. Ms. St. Cloud is trespassing, Nia said coldly. She's occupying a seat she hasn't paid for. Remove her. You can't do this, Tiffany screamed as the guards grabbed her arms. I have rights. I'm Tiffany St. Cloud. You're on the no-fly list, Nia corrected her, for every airline in the Sterling Alliance. That includes this one, British Airways, and about 6 others. You're going to have to take a boat to London, honey. Get off me! Tiffany shrieked, kicking and screaming as she was dragged down the aisle. Muffin barked wildly. And take the dog, Nia added, but be gentle with him. He's the only innocent one in that family. The entire cabin watched in stunned silence as the screaming Tiffany St. Cloud was hauled off the plane, her cries echoing down the jet bridge. When silence finally returned to the cabin, Nia looked around. She saw the shocked faces of the other passengers. I apologize for the disturbance, Nia said, smiling warmly. To compensate you for the delay, I have instructed the crew to issue a $5,000 travel voucher to every passenger on this flight, and for the first-class cabin. She looked at the empty seat 1A. Open the vintage reserves, Nia told the remaining flight attendant, a terrified young woman named Chloe. Serve the Salon 1997 champagne, and bring me a glass. I believe I have a seat to reclaim. Nia sat down in Seat 1A. She put her headphones back on. She closed her eyes. Captain, Nia said into the air, knowing the cockpit was listening. Take us to London. At 38,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean, while the rest of the first-class cabin slept under heavy duvets, Nia Sterling was wide awake. The cabin was dark, illuminated only by the soft blue glow of the aisle lights and the piercing brightness of Nia's laptop screen. She wasn't watching a movie. She wasn't sipping the Salon 1997 champagne she had ordered earlier. She was hunting. Nia had connected to the plane's internal Wi-Fi, but she wasn't using the guest network. Using an admin key she had acquired during the purchase transfer hours ago, she had bypassed the firewall and was now deep inside Aerolux's central server, specifically the Passenger Allocation System, PAS. Something about Brett's behavior hadn't sat right with her. He had been too confident. He had mentioned a system error with too much rehearsal, and Tiffany St. Cloud had been too certain that Sat 1A belonged to her, despite Nia holding a valid ticket. Nia's fingers flew across the keyboard. She ran a forensic search on the booking history for flight 409. Ping. The results appeared on her screen in a cascading waterfall of data. Naya's eyes narrowed. "Got you," she whispered. She found Tiffany's booking. It hadn't been made through the Aerolux website. It hadn't been made through a travel agent. It had been manually injected into the system 24 hours ago with a code tagged Ghost Tier. Nia frowned. She opened a command line and searched the entire company database for Ghost Tier. The search returned over 4,000 hits in the last year alone. Nia clicked on the financial trail for Tiffany's ticket. The seat was priced at $12,000, but the payment hadn't gone to Aerolux's corporate account at JP Morgan Chase. It had been routed to a shell company called Sky High Consulting LLC, based in the Cayman Islands. Nia leaned back, the leather of seat 1A creaking softly. This wasn't just a rude flight attendant. This was a massive, industrial-scale embezzlement scheme. Someone at the top of Aerolux was selling prime seats to entitled elites like Tiffany St. Cloud, kicking legitimate passengers off the plane and pocketing the cash through a dummy corporation. They were stealing from the airline to line their own pockets, destroying the brand's reputation in the process. Nia hit a button on the armrest. Ding. A moment later, Chloe, the young flight attendant who had replaced Brett as the lead, appeared silently by her side. Chloe looked terrified. She had seen her boss fired and a passenger dragged off by police. She was walking on eggshells. "Ms. Sterling?" Chloe whispered. "Can I get you anything? More water? A warm towel?" "Sit down, Chloe," Nia said, gesturing to the ottoman opposite her seat. I'm not allowed to sit while on duty, Mom." "I own the airline," Nia said gently. "I'm changing the rules." "Sit." Chloe sat, her hands trembling in her lap. "Chloe, I'm not going to fire you," Nia started, her voice low. "But I need you to be honest with me. If you lie, you will be walking out the door with Brett. If you tell the truth, you have a future here." Chloe nodded, her eyes wide. "Okay." Nia turned her laptop screen so Chloe could see it. She pointed to the code Ghost Tier. "What is this?" Nia asked. Chloe's face went pale. She looked around the cabin to make sure the other passengers were asleep. It's the VIP override program," Chloe whispered. "The crews call it the snob swap. We get a manifest update right before boarding. It usually highlights a seat, always the best seat, and tells us to move the original passenger to economy or kick them off. We're told it's a priority reaccommodation." "And who tells you to do this?" Nia asked. "Operations," Chloe said. "But the memos always come from the top, from Mr. Pendleton's office. Arthur Pendleton, the Chief Operating Officer, COO. The man responsible for the day-to-day running of the airline." Nia knew the name. He was an industry veteran, a man who wore three-piece suits and smiled for Forbes magazine covers. "Does Brett do this often?" Nia asked. Brett was the favorite, Chloe admitted. He loved the Ghost Tier. He bragged that he got a commission for every passenger he bumped. He said Mr. Pendleton took care of the fixers. Nia felt a cold fury rising in her chest. Her airline, her new acquisition, was being run like a mafia racket. They were assaulting paying customers to service a black market for the ultra-rich. "Thank you, Chloe," Nia said, closing the laptop. "You've been very helpful." Are you going to shut us down?" Chloe asked, fear in her voice. "No," Nia said, staring out the window at the dark abyss of the ocean. "I'm not going to shut the airline down. But when we land in London, I'm going to burn the management to the ground." Nia pulled out her phone. She composed an email to her personal security team, Blackwater Ops. To Chief of Security Subject, Heathrow Arrival, message. "Do not take me to the hotel. Secure the Aerolux private hangar at Heathrow. I want the entire London Executive Board present when I land. Tell Arthur Pendleton to be there. Tell him I'm bringing champagne." Nia hit send. She reclined her seat. She had 4 hours until London. She needed to rest. Because when she landed, war was beginning. The wheels of the Boeing 777 kissed the tarmac of London Heathrow at 6:45 a.m. local time. The sky was a bruising shade of grey, crying a light, miserable drizzle. Usually, a commercial flight would taxi to Terminal 5. But Flight 409 didn't go to the terminal. Under Nia's specific instructions relayed from the cockpit, the massive aircraft turned off the main taxiway and headed toward the private aviation sector on the south side of the airfield. They rolled toward a massive hangar with the Aerolux logo painted on the side. As the engines whined down, Nia looked out the window. A fleet of black Range Rovers was waiting on the tarmac. A red carpet had actually been rolled out, a desperate attempt at flattery. Standing at the base of the stairs, holding a large umbrella, was a man who looked like he had been carved out of expensive soap. Arthur Pendleton. He was tall, silver-haired, and wearing a Savile Row suit that cost more than Chloe's yearly salary. He wore a practiced smile, the kind politicians use before they stab you in the back. The cabin door opened. The cool London air rushed in. Nia stepped out. She had changed out of her hoodie. She was now wearing a sharp black blazer over a white silk camisole, her hair pulled back in a severe, sleek ponytail. She wore dark sunglasses, even though there was no sun. She walked down the stairs, her sneakers silent on the metal. Arthur Pendleton stepped forward, the umbrella extended to shield her from the rain. "Ms. Sterling," Arthur boomed, his voice full of fake joviality. "Welcome to London. What a surprise acquisition. We were all quite shocked at headquarters, but delighted, simply delighted. I'm Arthur Pendleton, your COO." Nia didn't take the hand he offered. She didn't step under the umbrella. She stood in the rain, letting the drizzle mist her face. It felt cleansing. "Mr. Pendleton," Nia said coolly, "you can put the hand down. I don't shake hands with thieves." The smile on Arthur's face faltered for a microsecond before twitching back into place. I beg your pardon? That's a very specific sense of humor you have, Miss Sterling." "It wasn't a joke," Nia said. She walked past him, toward the open doors of the hangar. "Inside, now. Bring the board." Arthur signaled to the other executives waiting by the cars, the CFO, the VP of Marketing, the Director of HR. They all looked confused, exchanging nervous glances as they scurried after Nia into the cavernous hangar. Inside, the hangar was cold and smelled of jet fuel and grease. In the center, a single long folding table had been set up, surrounded by luxury office chairs that looked out of place on the concrete floor. Nia walked to the head of the table. She didn't sit. She threw her limited edition prototype sneakers onto the table, thud, and leaned forward, placing her palms on the surface. The executives gathered around, looking like scolded school children. Arthur Pendleton tried to regain control of the room. "Ms. Sterling," Arthur said, his voice tightening. "Perhaps this isn't the best venue. We have the boardroom prepared at the Canary Wharf office. We have a caterer." "I don't want quiche, Arthur," Nia cut him off. "I want answers." She pulled a USB drive from her pocket and tossed it onto the table. It slid across the surface and stopped right in front of Arthur. "Do you know what that is?" Nia asked. Arthur looked at the drive. He swallowed. "I assume it's data regarding your vision for the company." "It's a copy of the Ghost tier ledger," Nia lied. She didn't have the full ledger yet, just the trace, but she needed him to panic. "It details every single time you sold a seat for cash to a shell company in the Caymans. It details every passenger you ordered your crews to assault or downgrade." The color drained from Arthur's face so fast he looked like a corpse. The other executives gasped. The CFO, a frantic-looking man named Giles, looked at Arthur with horror. "Arthur," Giles stammered. "What is she talking about? You said the Cayman accounts were for fuel hedging." "Shut up, Giles," Arthur hissed. He straightened his jacket, dropping the friendly facade. His eyes turned cold. "Ms. Sterling, you're new here. You don't understand how the aviation industry works. Margins are razor thin. We need high net worth individuals. If I bent a few rules to keep the Senator St. Clouds of the world happy, it was for the good of the company. You stole $4 million last quarter alone," Nia said, her voice rising. "And you instituted a culture of bullying that trickled down to the flight attendants. You made people like Brett Hansen think it was okay to abuse passengers because you were doing it from the boardroom." "I did what was necessary," Arthur shouted, his voice echoing in the hangar. "And what are you going to do? Fire me? I have a golden parachute clause in my contract. If you fire me, you owe me $20 million. Check the bylaws." Arthur smiled smugly. He thought he had checkmated her. He thought she was just a young, inexperienced girl with too much money. Nia smiled back. It was a shark's smile. "You're right, Arthur," Nia said. "Your contract does have a $20 million severance package, if you are terminated without cause." Nia snapped her fingers. From the shadows of the hangar, 3 men stepped forward. They weren't private security. They wore blue windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back. NCA, the National Crime Agency, the UK's version of the FBI. "However," Nia continued, her voice dripping with satisfaction, "the contract is void if the employee is engaged in criminal racketeering and international wire fraud." Arthur spun around. The NCA officers approached him, handcuffs ready. This is a set-up," Arthur sputtered. "You can't do this. I know people. I know the Prime Minister." "The Prime Minister hates flight delays," Nia said dryly. "And he really hates tax evasion." An officer grabbed Arthur's wrists. "Arthur Pendleton, I am arresting you on suspicion of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit assault." As the cuffs clicked shut, a sound that echoed beautifully in the large hangar, Nia walked up to Arthur. She reached into his breast pocket and pulled out his company ID badge. "You're fired, Arthur," Nia whispered. "With cause. And I'm suing you personally for the return of every single penny you stole. By the time I'm done, you won't even be able to afford a seat on a Greyhound bus." Arthur was dragged away, shouting profanities, his expensive shoes scuffing against the concrete floor. Nia turned to the remaining executives. They were trembling. Giles, the CFO, looked like he was about to faint. "Now," Nia said, clapping her hands together, the sound sharp and loud. "Who wants to explain to me why the in-flight Wi-Fi costs $20 when it should be free? Or am I going to have to call the police again?" Giles raised a shaking hand. I can explain that, Ms. Sterling. We can change it. Today. Right now." "Good," Nia said. "Meeting adjourned. Get to work." She walked out of the hangar, back into the rain. A black Bentley was waiting for her now. She got in the back seat. She was exhausted. She was hungry. But she wasn't done. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah, the gate agent back at JFK. Message: "Ms. Sterling, you won't believe this. A video of the incident on the plane just went viral on TikTok. 50 million views in 2 hours. People are calling you a hero." "But there's a problem." Nia frowned. She typed back, "What problem?" Message: "The video shows Tiffany's face, clearly. Her father, the senator. He just went on live TV. He claims the video is deep fake AI generated by you to sabotage his career. He's suing you for defamation, and he's calling for a boycott of Aerolux. Nia stared at the phone. The senator was doubling down. He was going to use his political weight to crush her before she could even get started. "Driver," Nia said to the man in the front seat. "Yes, ma'am? To the hotel?" "No," Nia said, her eyes flashing. "Take me to the BBC Broadcast Centre. I think it's time for an exclusive interview." The red on-air light buzzed above the door of the BBC's primetime interview studio. Inside, Senator Harrison St. Cloud sat opposite the host, looking every inch the aggrieved victim. "It is a political witch hunt," the senator declared, smoothing his silk tie. "My daughter Tiffany is a sweet girl. That video circulating online, it's a deep fake, artificial intelligence created by a hostile business rival to slander my family. I have never embezzled a dime." The host nodded gravely. "And what of this Nia Sterling, the new owner?" "A fraud," St. Cloud spat. "She's an opportunist. I intend to have her investigated for corporate espionage." "You can start that investigation right now, Senator." The studio went silent. The camera swung around. Nia Sterling walked onto the set, uninvited but undeniable. She held a single manila folder. The producers didn't cut the feed. The drama was too good. "Ms. Sterling," the host stammered. "We weren't expecting." "I was in the neighborhood," Nia said, taking the empty seat next to the senator. She placed the folder on the glass table. "Get this woman away from me," St. Cloud growled, though his eyes darted nervously to the folder. "Senator, you claim the video is fake," Nia said calmly, facing the camera. "You claim you paid for your daughter's ticket with personal funds. But my internal audit of Aerolux revealed something interesting." She opened the folder. She held up a document. It was a bank transfer receipt. "This is a wire transfer for $12,000 to the Ghost tier account in the Caymans," Nia explained to the audience. "It paid for Tiffany's seat on Flight 409. But look at the originating account number." The camera zoomed in. "That isn't a personal checking account," Nia said, her voice cutting like a knife. "That is the account for the Save Our Veterans Charity Fund, a charity you chair, Senator. You used money donated for wounded soldiers to buy your daughter extra legroom for her Pomeranian." The senator's face turned a violent shade of purple. That's confidential financial data. You stole that." "I own the airline, Senator," Nia smiled. "I didn't steal it. I found it in the trash bin of the man I just fired, and I've already sent a copy to the FBI." Two uniformed officers stepped onto the studio floor. The live feed didn't cut away as they asked the senator to stand up. "Harrison St. Cloud," the officer said, "you are under arrest for wire fraud and embezzlement." As the senator was led away in handcuffs, screaming about immunity, Nia looked into the camera. "At Aerolux," she said, winking, "we take our baggage policies very seriously, especially the emotional baggage." 6 months later, Aerolux was voted the #1 airline in the world. The Ghost tier was dismantled. In its place, Nia instituted a program where unsold first-class seats were given to teachers, nurses, and veterans for free. Tiffany St. Cloud was sentenced to community service. She was last seen picking up litter in Central Park, wearing an orange vest that clashed horribly with her complexion. She's still banned from every airline. She takes the bus. Brett Hansen, the former flight attendant, couldn't get hired by another airline. He currently works at a car rental counter at the airport, watching planes take off that he will never step foot on again. Every time a customer yells at him about a compact car, he thinks of Nia. And Nia Sterling. She still flies Seat 1A, but every now and then she walks back to economy, finds a tired student or a stressed mother, and swap seats with them. Because she knows that true power isn't about looking down on people, it's about lifting them up. And that is the story of how one entitled heiress and a corrupt flight attendant learned the hardest lesson of their lives. Never judge a book by its cover, and never mess with Nia Sterling. It's a reminder that no matter how much money or power you think you have, character is the only currency that matters in the end. If you enjoyed seeing instant karma served at 30,000 feet, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about justice, revenge, and billionaires going undercover, make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a video. Let me know in the comments, what would you have done if you were Nia? See you in the next story.